And the first one is that you have to want to do it. And I know that sounds a bit stupid, doesn't it? Obviously. But there are a lot of people who sit in jobs and vocations that they hate and expect to do one. And it doesn't work that way. You have to want to do it. Muhammad Ali, perhaps one of the greatest boxing champions the world has ever seen, probably put it better than anyone. He said, champions are not made in the gym. They are made from something deep within them. A dream, a desire, a vision. And it's amazing how powerful that can be when you see it in action. But it's not enough on its own. Just on its own, it really doesn't get you anywhere. You often hear about people talking about visualization and things like that. And these are all nice techniques to have, but they're not going to get you anywhere on their own. Prince Charles, for example, believes that if you talk to plants, that helps them grow. That may be true. I have no idea. I honestly don't know whether or not talking to plants helps them grow or not. What I do know is that regardless of whether or not you talk to your plants, if you don't water them, they die. No, honestly, come on. Keep growing. It's okay. Don't need the water. Well known, of course, in Britain, around the world, for my stance against genetic engineering. It's quite ironic, really, considering I'm Britain's best example. So it's not enough on its own. You need more than simply, the vision. But it has to be there at the beginning. You've got to want to do it. You've got to want to be involved. You've got to be able to commit in that way. The second thing that you find these guys have in common, though, is high expectations. They expect it to be a tough road to hoe. Because it's not enough simply to have high expectations in terms of outcomes. That's easy. Anyone can set goals. That's not difficult. But you've also got to expect it to be difficult and have high expectations in terms of how hard the task is going to be. You have to be realistic about what's in front of you. That way, when you find out you're right down the track, you're not discouraged. And there's a beautiful quote from Martin Luther King, who probably put this better than anyone, albeit rather poetically. He said, even if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets as Michelangelo painted, or as Beethoven wrote music. He should sweep streets so that all the hosts of heaven and earth might pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. And high expectations demands that whatever your job is, you do it to the absolute best of your ability. The interesting thing about best is that it's an entirely subjective measure. It's whatever you decide it is. Other people don't anoint you as the best, you decide what it is. And the fascinating thing about that is that as world champions and world record holders, you never get there. You're always chasing. You never actually get to your best. Because as soon as you achieve whatever you thought your best was, high expectations demands that you automatically raise the bar. So you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going. That's why a lot of world champions, the guys that go on that have the stellar careers, if you like, are not particularly goal-driven. Because if they were, for example, people like Ian Thorpe were goal-driven, he would have stopped at one gold medal. That would have been it, wouldn't he? There has to be something deeper driving him to keep him coming back, to keep him trying to improve again and again and again. And they make some pretty tough decisions in order to do that. Ian Thorpe, before he went to his final Olympics, dumped his coach of God knows how many years. Not because they had a falling out, but because he knew that coach couldn't get him to the next level that he needed to go to. So you're always chasing, always battling. Now sometimes those two things thrown together, that vision if you like and those high expectations, can look like they're enough on their own. And a great example of this happened in the early 60s, 1961 I think, when John F. Kennedy uttered the immortal words, "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy. We choose to go to the moon because it is difficult." Anyone have any idea where NASA's space program was up to at that point?
Yeah.
Where? Zero. Yeah. They didn't have a rocket capable of reaching orbit. That's how far behind the eight ball they were. Never mind the moon, they couldn't even make it into space. couldn't get through the atmosphere. The Russians had just done it, but the Americans at that point had nothing. And yet, in the space of 8 short years, they put 2 men on the moon and returned them safely to the Earth. If you think about it, it was a bit of a bonus. It wasn't in the original plan. He didn't say, we choose to go to the moon and come back. Original plan, leave them there, wave the flag a bit, keep the conspiracy theorists happy. Absolutely incredible what they did when you consider what happened to Apollo 1. What happened to Apollo 1? Does anyone remember?
Yes, it blew up.
Yeah, fire on the launch pad, and they lost 3 astronauts. First time they had ever lost astronauts in the space program. Never happened before. They'd lost them on the weekends, joyriding for the Air Force, that kind of thing, but never in the space program itself. You couldn't have had a worse start, could you? And yet, 8 years later, 2 men on the moon and returned them safely to Earth. Incredible advances made during that time. For example, the Americans spent $2 billion, which is a lot of money back then, developing a ballpoint pen that could write in zero gravity. Amazing. The Russians faced with the same problem, used a pencil, but that's not the point. Brilliant innovation. All sorts of things came out of the space program. Teflon, for example, Teflon that you have on your frying pan so your eggs don't stick, that was developed by NASA, which is bizarre because you'd think, surely in space, you want your eggs to stick. Just have the bacon. All sorts of innovations came out of the space program like that. And a combination of those high expectations. The amount of computing technology that sat in Apollo 11, which went to the moon, is exceeded, something, Alan, you'll know this because you're into this techie kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a pocket calculator. That's what they're figuring out how to get the moon. and you've got a pocket calculator. You know how many times you bugger up a single coin. No, that's not right, is it? Is that the moon? Can we hook around and go back? No. Anyone been to Venus? Incredible the way they develop. But that, again, those two things, it appears as if that's enough on the surface, but in actual fact it's not, is it? Because there's a third factor involved. And it's indicated by the amount that they had to go to with Apollo 1, having that fire on the launch pad and so on, perseverance, sticking at it, keeping going. And the whole world is telling you that it can't be done, that you're wrong, that you're stupid, that you're silly. And there's lots and lots of examples of that occurring around the world, everywhere you look. People persevering. You always hear these stories about the guys who refused to give up, and it was the next time round that they actually made it. David Rutledge, who won 2 years before I did, representing New Zealand, he spent 16 years on and off competing for the World Championship. That's amazing to me. That achievement to me exceeds mine, eclipses mine, manyfold. Because that's the kind of determination and perseverance that's involved. I was a genius, pretty much entered it twice, that was it. But David, obviously a bit slower. It's a brilliant achievement. Now the thing is that those 3 things that we've talked about, so every single person in this room already has, in abundance. That's the reality. All of you think about this, to achieve anything in your life, whether it's business, personal, whatever, you had to, A, have some sort of dream or vision or desire, B, set yourself high expectations, C, persevere. Who's got kids? Yeah, same thing applies. You either wanted to have them or wanted to keep them. One of them. You have high expectations for your children, don't you? Most parents have recurring dreams, recurring nightmares. And the dream is where one day the child gets up in front of an audience like this and says, I'd like to thank the Nobel Academy for this magnificent honour. And the nightmare is when they get up in front of an audience much smaller than this and they say, you want fries with that? Some of you may be living that at the moment.